Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello, it's DJ Ross in Mountain View, California.
Each week on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. On this week's show, we're playing Gal Guardians, Lost in Play, and Final Fantasy XIV.
Oh, what a surprise.
I've heard of it.
Heard of it? Oh, that wasn't the case 15 minutes ago. Trying to be all
I heard
coy.
about it first 15 minutes ago.
Oh, I see. Oh, well, no, it all makes sense.
I'm an expert and I'm prepared to take your questions.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll flip that segment around.
Yeah. If it's a new week, it means there's a new Final Fantasy game.
It's true. Last week there were 6 of them, although they weren't totally new.
Oh, this is the Pixel remasters? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, they finally came out on other platforms. What are they? It was really weird. At first, they were just on mobile and Steam. You know,
weird to launch first on mobile. That was a strange flex.
Interesting choice. Yeah, you know, the ideal place for you to play a 20 to 30 hour RPG.
Yes, yeah, on a device whose battery lasts at best 6 hours.
But now they're all over the place. And actually, didn't even plan on this, but it's worth mentioning. There was so much uproar when these initially came out, because in the Western releases, there was so much drama around the font they chose for all the menus that people were like coming up with their own custom like font packs that you could install on Steam or on the mobile version somehow. And they were just like causing such a fuss about how little effort Square Enix had put into these re-releases, because like most of the rest of it was very well done. It was just the font people didn't really care for. But with this new release on different platforms, and I assume this is coming to all the previous editions as well, they've added a new font for the Western editions, which looks like a real font that, for the most part, looks like it belongs in the game, which is great.
How exciting.
Yeah, it was like 50-50 whether they would actually like listen to all the feedback, I feel like. So, just to give credit where it's due, good job, Square Enix, for, better late than never, fixing the font with these games.
So what was the objection to the original font?
The rest of the game is fully pixel art, and it's like higher resolution than it was back in the day, but it's still, when it comes down to it, it's pretty chunky looking.
Mm-hmm.
But they added this font, which looks like, it's just, they grabbed the default font out of Microsoft Word or something and used that for all the dialogue boxes, and it like wasn't the same width as everything else. It was like very narrow and actually kind of difficult to read in some cases. So it just looked like they kind of absent-mindedly settled on this font for the like all the English scripts and everything. But Comic the one they're going Sans, with now, I assume, right? No, it was like Arial narrow or something like that. But the one they use now is very pixely, and it's still, interestingly enough, it doesn't really look like the original pixel fonts they used when these first came out, way back in the day. But I'd say it's a huge improvement over the previous font. So, good on them.
Nice.
Plus, it's great that they're on other platforms, too, because I know a lot of people were waiting a real long time for this to show up on the Switch and other stuff. So, that's really cool.
Yeah, I've seen on Twitter, I guess this is not sort of normally available in the US, people are importing the Switch collection that includes all of them, and it's very expensive.
I think, if you want the physical edition, you have to get the one that has all 6. I thought they came out in the US. It might have been like a limited thing.
Oh, gotcha.
But since it's Square Enix, there are several tiers of the physical edition. I think one comes with like a crazy pixel art, like art book, which looks super nice, and maybe a soundtrack. But if you prefer the a la carte route, you can just grab them off the eShop or your digital storefront of choice, which is nice.
Oh, cool! You're not required to buy all of them.
Right. You can pick and choose.
Yeah, gotcha.
You can skip over Final Fantasy II like everybody is planning to do, you haters.
You skipped right to 14, so...
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, don't waste my time with the first 13. I don't need to play those again.
Well, cool.
Should we get right into it?
Do you want to come back to Final Fantasy later? Was the font news your only headline, or...?
No, the font news was a surprise edition. I wasn't even planning on it. I don't know how eager you are to talk about, like, lost in play. Do you want to start with that? Do you want to hear what's going on?
Well, actually, I wanted to sort of revisit something from a couple of weeks ago, actually, that I had in my notes here that I've kind of carried for the last couple that I think is worth a follow-up is
well, let's do that.
A little Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh, not this game again.
Update. It seems a little weird to sort of front load Video Game Hangover full of Tears of the Kingdom chat because that's coming.
Mm-hmm.
But you posited a few weeks ago a couple of questions, things that were not known about Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh, but they're still not known.
Well, I want to revisit that. Last week we had the third, and what they're saying is the final trailer for Tears of the Kingdom, which was really good and kind of broke the internet for an afternoon.
I did not watch this trailer.
Oh, are you on full media blackout at this point, or?
I mean, don't give away, Link is the final boss or whatever. That's not true. Don't write us hate mail. But I mean, just say whatever you're going to say. It's fine.
Okay. I mean, I have a toxic theory that I don't know if I necessarily want to share on the show.
Definitely share that.
But let's go back to the thing is that you had asked a couple weeks ago, kind of three kind of unknowns about Tears of the Kingdom. Mm-hmm. One is, will there be kind of weapon durability?
Yes.
Will weapons be constantly breaking and you have to replace them? Question number two is, will there be sort of air quotes here, traditional Zelda dungeons? And will you at some point get to play as Princess Zelda herself?
Mm-hmm.
The weapon durability thing, I think we're pretty clear on at this point. Yes, your weapons are going to break.
Yeah, they showed. I mean, I did watch bits of that gameplay demo.
That was Anuma's gameplay demonstration, a little 10-minute chunk. Yeah,
I really wanted to see the thing where Link floats up into the ceiling, and then I stopped it after that. But it's just I couldn't make any sense of what everybody was talking about. They're like, "Did you see Link go through the ceiling?" It's like, what? So I had to watch that part. I had to break my my media blackout just for that.
Excellent. Yes, although there does seem to be some mechanism in the game where you can kind of fortify weapons.
Yes, and I think that's sort of like things. What I was hoping for. It's not exactly the same durability system. There's some safeguards you can take.
Right, you get a little more mileage out of things that maybe you like.
Yeah.
Yep. Will there be dungeons? I don't think we know that yet. There are certainly things that have been seen kind of in the periphery of the footage and stuff that we've seen thus far that have led us to believe we know that there is a big underground kind of cave system that didn't really exist in Breath of the Wild. Whether or not those are dungeons, I guess, is TBD.
Let me tell you, I've seen a lot of speculation around this one, and a lot of people making posts and videos claiming that they know the answer to this question. And I don't think anybody knows the answer to this, except maybe for probably Aonuma has some.
Sure. I mean, somebody does, but they don't have a Twitter account, right?
Yeah. So I've seen a lot of interesting theories, but for this one, I'm going to wait till the game comes out and answers these, it puts these theories to rest. Yeah.
And will you be able to play as Zelda? And again, I feel like that's just we don't know.
Still feeling like that's not going to happen, but fingers crossed.
It seems very unlikely.
Yeah.
Although maybe get to play as Ganon at some point.
Was that the wild theory you had?
Well, we're Ganondorf right now is because he's a person. No, well, my weird toxic theory is that there's a chunk in the newest trailer where it sort of looks like, and this might just be bad editing or me leaping, where it looks like...
for spoilers?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Listeners, if you're sensitive to wild, harebrained theories about Tears of the Kingdom, you might want to skip ahead a minute.
Okay. How about go ahead and listen to this. If I determine that this is a spoiler, we will bleep it, so don't worry about anything.
Okay. All right. I have a theory based on the last trailer that...
Oh, okay. That's a good
and that
theory.
We're doing some wild kind of thing, and that also the and it's not all over the internet. And I watched the trailer a couple times, and I'm left to the same conclusion every time I see it, where I'm like, no, that's kind of what it looks like is happening right there.
Oh, this is your own theory that you came up with?
I think so, because I've searched Google for it, and I've watched, YouTube, the 15 things you missed from the last Zelda trailer. And nobody else is calling this out. So maybe I'm insane or maybe I'm right and everybody else is wrong.
Okay.
That's generally not how these things go, but we'll all find out together on May 12th.
That would be quite a thing if that would happen.
Be. You heard it here first on Video Game Hangover.
I'm going to go ahead and bleep that, but if you want to hear the whole thing, I don't think it's a huge spoiler because it's all speculation.
Yeah.
We'll put the full unedited thing after the credits, so stick around if you want to hear it.
Oh, lovely.
I think it's just a theory at this point.
Sure. Yeah. Might be bonkers. But then again.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, we don't know a lot about this thing thus far. Maybe that's just another thing.
I have to say, like, it's a bit cliche, but I love stuff like that. So it would be, We'll see what happens.
And I don't think there's a precedent in Zelda lore for that. So, and Zelda lore is all over the place too.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're already at a disadvantage with Tears of the Kingdom in that it is a direct sequel to the one that came before, and that's not a thing that happens in Zelda games very often. So, yeah, I'm not sure where they're pulling from on this.
I try and stay out of Zelda lore as much as possible, but that's just my approach to it.
Yeah. I fell into a rabbit hole shortly after that trailer came out of what's the difference between Ganon and Ganondorf? And there's a lot of stuff in there apparently from Skyward Sword, which I've not played, unfortunately.
Oh, yes.
Where folks have determined that is the oldest Zelda timeline.
I've heard that. That's the first Zelda game.
And that's sort of what we know about Ganondorf as a person, kind of originates in the lore of that game.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is really interesting. Maybe I need to play Skyward Sword before Zelda comes out.
Just Tears of the Kingdom Skyward Sword in there in the next couple of weeks.
Just squeeze another 100 hours into. No, I'm not going to do that. That's just silly. But I've consumed a lot more just kind of scattered Zelda backstory and people furiously trying to glue all of these disparate pieces together over the last week or two, and my brain is mush.
Don't do it. I mean, I appreciate that people really enjoy all the theory crafting and everything, but the Zelda series, along with a lot of other Nintendo stuff, just feels like it's a futile exercise to just try and make some sense out of the timeline and all that. I also think of Metroid, where they're just like, why did she lose all her cool equipment? What happened to her ship from the last one? Why doesn't she age? I'm like, guys, just relax.
Yeah. Well, because Nintendo's thing is very much gameplay over story. And that, the gameplay comes first. You determine abilities and all that other fun stuff, and then you craft a story around that, which I have to presume is not the way that, The Last of Us or God of War have been built.
No, yeah. Well, I don't know what's going on with God of War, but I think The Last of Us definitely has a very different approach.
Yeah.
Man, I was reading up on a lot of the Resident Evil timeline because the 4 remake came out and there's a new movie coming out that looks horrific. But people are just trying to slot this in. And something I thought was something that caught me off guard with the 4 remake is that it still takes place in 2005 or whenever the original one did. They didn't time skip ahead to 2023 or for whatever reason. But in the intro, Leon is giving his little voiceover. He's like, "Oh, I remember, it was just yesterday, 1998 Raccoon City or whatever." I'm like, wait a minute, is he going to be 40 years old now? But no, it's still firmly in 2005, which was an interesting choice. So I don't know what's going on with the Resident Evil timeline. I guess that's the takeaway.
I don't know if I've played enough Resident Evil games to know, but is there intended to be some degree of continuity between all of those games?
I don't know if it extends throughout all of them, but certainly, and especially when they were coming out at a more regular pace. Resident Evil 2, and it was Resident Evil 1, 2, and then 3, sort of interestingly, took place both before and after Resident Evil 2, I think. And then it went, maybe there was Resident Evil 4, and then it went kind of off the rails. So I don't know what the current status is. I don't know what year it is in the Resident Evil universe.
All right. I guess I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. Maybe whenever you get around to playing Village and Resident Evil 7, though I did it backwards, you can catch me up.
we'll pool our wisdom and see if we can knit it together somewhere.
Yeah. How old is Chris Redfield exactly?
112.
Well, I mean, he looks great. That's the case.
Cool. All right. Well, and that, I guess that's our little progress report. It seems unlikely with that being the sort of announced as the last trailer that we're going to get answers to the unanswered Zelda questions there about dungeons and actually playing as Zelda. But I wanted to revisit that because you had posed a few questions that at the very least we knew the answer to one of since.
Yeah. I have to say, I feel like we were pretty dead on with what we were predicting for that one, the weapon durability one.
Yeah.
So, take note when the game comes out and there are actual Zelda dungeons back in.
I was saying, Nintendo not really, known for soliciting tons of player feedback and giving the people what they want necessarily. So
yeah.
Someone landed on weapon durability and now that's a thing forever.
I'm still upset about the knife breaking in Resident Evil 4, but I've talked enough about that game.
And so from there, probably we should pivot to the other games we've been playing recently.
All right.
Because we are not playing Tears of the Kingdom yet, although it is 2 weeks away, and that blows my mind a little bit.
It's fine. Just, deep breaths. What is it? Breathe into a paper bag. You'll be fine.
Settle all of your affairs.
Yeah.
Take the phone off the hook. Remember when you used to take a phone off a hook? Remember that?
I don't know if I ever had to do that. I don't know.
Are you old enough to appreciate?
I mean, I know what that means.
Okay.
I'm just saying I was never had just so many people calling me that I had to take the phone off the hook.
Take the phone off the hook.
Yeah.
So Lost in Play. I mentioned briefly last week is an adventure game that I've been playing.
Yeah.
And am now done with. So I'm glad I waited a week.
Good.
This is a super fun adventure game. It's two little kids, a brother and a sister, who enjoy what's the way to sort of describe this? Kind of doing like imaginary play. And one of the opening scenes is the sister trying to get her brother's attention, trying to bait him into playing with her. And she builds a monster robot mask out of a cardboard box. And from there, the two siblings try to kind of out imagine each other. But they go so far that they completely wipe out their family home and their family and find themselves lost in play, lost in some imaginary, absurd, made up, make-believe world with all of these kind of interesting influences of things from their real life transposed into their imaginations. They have this realization where, hey, we've gone too far and we have to make our way back home. So the game is you taking turns kind of controlling the two of them and trying to piece together all of the puzzles to satisfy all of the sort of conditions and solve the mysteries that will get them back to reality. It's kind of cool. It takes a really kind of sharp turn from a funny, cute family domestic bliss to just absurdist, child imagination humor, and that it has a lot of anthropomorphic animals and the occasional joke about passing gas and things like that. That I generally sort of associate with sort of a childlike sense of humor, but I find funny as well. It's cool. It's the presentation of it is really neat. It looks very much like a Nickelodeon or a Disney Channel kind of animated show. The closest thing that I could get in my brain was, I forget the name of the show now. It was a Disney show. It had the word falls in the title.
I know. Gravity Falls.
Gravity Falls. That's the one. I feel like it looks a little bit like the animation in that. It does have kind of an afternoon cartoony kind of vibe to it.
One of those shows.
It takes a really unique approach to adventure games as well, and that it doesn't sort of descend into you having kind of a magnifying glass on the screen and trying to click around on everything, trying to figure out what is sort of relevant. Throughout the game, you have direct control over the brother or the sister, depending on which scenario you're in. And so all of their exploration, all of the things that they sort of collect, all of the things they sort of like try to piece together to advance the story and satisfy the conditions of the adventure, are done by directly kind of controlling them and walking them around the environment, interacting with other characters and stuff like that. So rather than just trying to sort of pixel hunt, you're doing sort of more traditional video gamey platformer kind of stuff, and still sort of collecting things, managing your inventory. I think it does some inventory stuff really uniquely as well, in that the stuff that you collect is relevant to the scenario that you're in, and you don't end up with things that sort of like are in your pockets for like 7 hours when you're trying to sort of look for the magic place where you're supposed to deploy that thing you picked up 6.5 hours ago. It auto combines things too. So if you have two things in your pockets that are supposed to be used together, it will combine them into the same inventory spot for you.
That's
so you're
interesting. I don't know how I feel about that.
I really like that concept, and that you're not trying to sort of like, well, if I find duct tape, I can tape the scissors to the rubber ball, and then I can whatever, like random adventure game logic. Lost in Play kind of does the logic for you.
But is it would it have occurred to you like, oh, I found the duct tape, that's the thing I've been looking for to combine with this other thing, or does it feel like it's solving the puzzle for you a little bit?
No, it doesn't necessarily feel like an autocomplete. I think the game is pretty good at sort of telegraphing, like, these are the 3 things that you need to find, or these are the 3 types of things that you need to find, and the game just sort of glues them together for you as you discover them. So okay. I think my thought to it was that like this was a concession to maybe younger players who might be playing this, but I just also sort of felt like it was a kind of a quality of life choice in designing an adventure game, and that they had already made the decision that, you know, the things that you find and carry around in your inventory were only going to be relevant to the scene that you're in. So why not take it the extra step to help sort of like combine relevant things and create some degree of kind of efficiency to that interaction. So I like those choices. I think particularly after playing a couple of adventure games recently, like Tangle Tower, another game I've kind of been slowly working through called Paranormasight, which feel a little more traditional, a little more deliberate, a little more plotting sometimes. There is a kind of an efficiency and a lightness to Lost in Play. There's still some pretty puzzling moments you find yourself in. There are some things that sort of feel like very specifically like puzzles. At some point you have to beat a seagull at a game that sort of feels like chess, but is done with bottle caps. And it has its own kind of unique rules that it sort of briefly explains to you, and you have to sort of like figure out how to best the seagull at this game. There's 2 other scenarios like that too, where you have to play an in-game mini game essentially against another opponent. And you'll eat it the first couple of times because you're still trying to figure it out. But eventually you get it, and like there's a light bulb that goes off. So the developers here have found kind of interesting ways to sort of put puzzles inside their puzzle game. Yeah, it's really neat. It's a lot of kind of like interesting layers to it, and a lot of like interesting sort of design choices that keep things kind of moving efficiently, but give you little like kind of meaty little moments of puzzle solving to kind of chew on for a little bit, so that it doesn't feel like everything is just kind of served to you. But yeah, it's super fun. I think a lot of really interesting decisions made here, in that there's no language in the game. The brother and sister don't talk to each other. Nobody else in the world talks directly. It's gibberish. So when they talk, it's kind of noise, and you're left to sort of like intone like intent and direction. Sometimes you get a little thought bubble to go by with an image inside of it. There's a scene late in the game that it's kind of almost like an Ocean's 11 kind of heist scenario, where some of the imaginary critters that you've sort of made friends with are helping you break into a castle to rescue your sister, and they lay out kind of blueprints with plans, and they through it, and there's little bubbles of things that go up over their head, and you're trying to sort of like remember the order and remember the things, because you assume as a player that you're going to have to collect those items to be able to do the heist. And it's smart. Again, it sort of feels kind of light, kind of efficient, but also kind of gives you context and lets you sort of like gives you some sort of accessibility, universality to it, in that you don't necessarily have to speak English or know how to read to intone what is supposed to happen in this scene. Yeah, I dig it. I think they've made some really kind of creative choices about how to sort of build their game and how to make it kind of light and fun, but still kind of make it a little challenging occasionally. Yeah, I had a lot of time, a good time playing it.
That's good. That's good. I'm still trying to find. I mean, played a lot of adventure games, sort of the point and click style back in the day, and I think, like, on some level, I have very fond memories of them just because they were sort of like these weird, very silly sort of games. But whenever I look back on them kind of critically, and it's like, I don't know how well these actually worked as like a game experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people always talk about when they bring up point and click adventure games, and like we love to sort of deride Phoenix Wright for the same reasons. So it's nice to see that people can still make a game sort of in the spirit of those older games, but without just the sort of needlessly frustrating elements.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Phoenix Wright games are an interesting mix in that a lot of what happens in those games gets by on personality alone, because they're, and they have some sort of genuinely kind of fun murder mysteries you're trying to solve. And murder is not a set of stakes that generally come across in, kind of gleefully animated kind of light video games. So the fact that everybody's sort of flamboyantly dressed and talking very exaggeratedly, but also trying to solve a pretty serious murder is kind of an interesting juxtaposition. But yeah, the adventure parts of the Ace Attorney games, the Phoenix Wright games, can be very frustrating. Particularly the early ones, the old DS games, have a lot of fail states built into them, where if you present the wrong piece of evidence at the wrong time, it's game over and you have to play through 15 minutes of cutscenes again to be able to get back to that point to present a separate piece of evidence and hope that that's the right one.
To present the next 5 pieces of evidence in your inventory, and hopefully one of those is the right one.
So a lot of my love for Ace Attorney at this point is really about, I love those characters. I love their stupid costumes. I love the grumpy judge. So they get by a lot on personality. And Lost in Play seems to have sort of found a way. Tangle Tower did too, I think, of making that feel a little more efficient, a little less punishing. I'm not aware of any fail states in Lost in Play. There is no point in this where you made the wrong choice. You have to go back to the main menu and start over. You have to go back to a save spot or a checkpoint and start over. It's pretty generous about how it sort of weighs your time and again gives you enough tools to be able to hopefully make the right choices. Sometimes you sort of give the character the wrong thing and they go, nope. But it's not like a game over. They don't send you back to start or anything like that. They really, no, I'm not interested in the rubber ball and the piece of tape at this point. Yeah. So you have to find out where that goes later.
Yeah. I think you had mentioned you're looking at the new Monkey Island last week. And I think the Monkey Island games have always been better about that, about not just like killing you and making you restart. But my memory of playing these types of games is from playing like the Sierra Online, like Space Quest and King's Quest, which would just like gleefully kill you at every opportunity. In fact, that was kind of the point. It felt like at times, which it's just like, what new absurd way can we kill the player character? And to some degree, that's what I was there for. I was just like, what kind of ridiculous situations can I get my guy into?
Sure.
But it was kind of shocking, actually, when I first played Monkey Island, and I was just like, when am I going to die? Like, my character never dies? They just tell him to, come back later? From what I remember, those still suffered a bit from, like, the obtuse puzzle solutions, and there's a bit of pixel hunting in there as well. But sounds like this is, just an improvement all around.
Yeah, some of Lost in Play does feel a little obtuse, but once you sort of realize sort of the language of it and understand that kind of everything that you find has value to the scenario, you're not carrying around extra stuff. You're not like, well, I better pick that up just in case it's important later. If it's interactable and you can pick it up and put it in your inventory, it has relevance. So again, that might be sort of a concession to kind of younger players or more inexperienced adventure game players, but it also makes the game feel a little lighter, a little breezier. It doesn't feel like kind of the high stakes decisions are coming from do I have room for that in my inventory? Should I carry that around for the next 4 hours? If you can pick it up, put it in your pocket, it's going to be important later.
Do you have a limited... I guess it doesn't matter because everything you pick up is important, but I was wondering if you had like a carrying capacity.
No, that never comes up.
Okay. I can't think of any adventure game where you just couldn't pick up stuff after a certain point. That would just be a nightmare.
Yeah. I don't... that's one of those things that sort of feels like very kind of old school, maybe RPG, like encumbrance, right? Isn't that the thing they call it in video games where like you can't carry around too much crap because then you walk slower?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, I get it, but like I also want to carry around 15 swords because you never know.
Yes. Yeah. It feels like it's not a kind of a mismatch for an adventure game.
Yeah. I like a weapon wheel. I like a Saints Row, hold down the trigger and you can rotate the stick to select from 15 different sub-automatic weapons. Yeah.
Yeah. They're just all in your backpack.
Yes. Yeah. That you can't see on the screen. They're just in your pockets. So, so back to Lost in Play. So it's a lot of fun. It's not a single sitting game. It took me about 5 hours, so maybe 2 generous sittings. But it's fun. Good beginning, middle, and end. It has a lot of really kind of funny, absurdist humor in it as you go further and further into the kids' imaginations. You do get kind of a Wizard of Oz kind of moment at the end of the game. I'm not giving anything away here, where you sort of see all of the funny kind of absurd influences from their imagination and how they tie back to kind of real world things in their family life, which was super cute. You kind of get a little payoff on. I thought it was fun. It was just a very kind of delightful, breezy adventure that I'm glad I played.
That's cool. Sounds very wholesome.
Yeah, it is that for lack of a better word. Yeah. So this is called Lost in Play. I'm playing it on the Switch. I know it's out on other platforms as well. If any of this sounds like fun, check it out.
Cool. It's been a while since I played an adventure game. Well, more of the point and click style, because I just played that Lunark thing last week, which was kind of an adventure game.
Sure, kind of a variation on the theme, right?
Yeah.
I've oddly found myself playing 3 of them back to back this year. So I don't know if I'm into adventure games now. We'll find out, I guess. So I want to play some more of the Paranormal Site before I kind of weigh in on it. I wasn't loving the first couple of hours with it yet. It's
good to say the listeners won't appreciate you at the start of this where you're like, oh yeah, there are no pixel hunting sections in Lost in Play. Because they didn't hear you complaining about Paranormal Site for like 15 minutes before we started recording.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of that in Paranormal Site, unfortunately. So I need to dig in a little deeper, I think, before I lodge my opinion on that one. But yeah. Do you want to do Final Fantasy? You want to do Gal Guardians?
Let's do Gal Guardians. That's fairly recent.
Sure. What's
So I don't know if it was because I was just playing Lunark or whatever, but I decided it was time to play an action game. I think I just ended up being really dissatisfied with the sort of action sequences in that game. But I've had this game sitting on my Switch for a few weeks, months. You know how it goes at this point.
What day is it?
Yeah. This is Gal Guardians, which is a side-scrolling action game by Inti Creates, who made... what did they make? They made the Azure Striker Gunvolt series. They did the little spin-off game for Bloodstain. I think it was Curse of the Moon, the sort of retro-styled one.
Oh, right.
And, they've done a bunch of other stuff. This is sort of their wheelhouse, the 2D action platformer. So it's kind of fun to come back to this, kind of do what I was in store for.
Well, it looks very Castlevania.
Yeah, it does. The logo might as well just say Castlevania. The hook in this is, so it's a spin-off of this other series that Inti Creates, I think, is also responsible for, called Gal Gun, which is kind of like, I think it's mildly dubious to me. It's one of those games, I think the premise in that game is like, your character is just being swarmed by hordes of Japanese schoolgirls or something. He has to fend them off with this gun that makes them very excited. And I'm just like, okay, you told me enough. I'm probably not going to play that one, but that's fine. Make whatever game you want. And I saw this trailer for this Gal Guardians. I was like, oh, this looks cool. It's like a Castlevania game. And it is like sort of tenuously tied to that Galgun series. So I got a little worried. I was like, oh, this is going to be like a cringy kind of Castlevania. I don't know if that's really what I want. But for the most part, it manages to be completely separated from that series. Like, you don't need to know, or you don't need to have any familiarity with it to get into this. Although it does feel like I'm missing a lot of backstory, because I think some of the characters make appearances in both both like series.
Oh.
But basically, the premise is there's some sort of demon girl who has fused the real world with the demon dimension. Because like the whole Galgun series, I think, takes place in like Japan or wherever, like just modern day Japan, because they're all going to high school. But in this, you see the two protagonists like walking to school, I suppose, and then suddenly they're in front of like Castlevania, like a big spooky castle in the background, and you would think that would be very, very disorienting. But they seem to be fine with it. They just roll with it. They're like, oh no, spooky castle, that doesn't bother us because we're demon hunters. And then they just throw off their school uniforms and they're just dressed in like, this super like flamboyant sort of gothic Castlevania outfits. I'm like, okay, this is fine. This is what I'm here for. And then it just turns into like more or less a 2D Castlevania game. So you play as these two sisters. One character has these melee attacks, which she does using like different origami shapes. But that was really interesting because it sort of builds into a bunch of her like sub abilities as well. You just throw out all these little origami animals. And that feels like a pretty standard sort of Castlevania character. But the other sister, and this is what really got my attention in the trailer, she just has a machine gun. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll just, I was kind of surprised they just haven't made a Metroidvania-style game where you just have a gun the whole time. But, now is the time, so I'm going to check this out. And it's cool because you just swap between these characters like you could do in several of those like DS Castlevania games. And you kind of have to balance, these the very powerful melee attacks that the one sister uses with the slightly safer sort of like long-range machine gun attacks, which are, good for picking up enemies at a distance. And I was just like, well, why wouldn't you just use the gun all the time? That seems like a no-brainer.
That's my first question for you, exactly.
Yeah. But they've been smart about it. So it turns out the gun is much weaker than the melee attacks, which I guess makes sense from a game balancing perspective. And also, this is interesting. You have to eventually reload the gun by... you just crouch for a little bit, and she takes a second to reload, which has never been a huge factor for like 90% of the gameplay, but I found that like during some of the boss fights, there have been some moments where I ran out of ammo, and I was like, oh no, I didn't think this would be a problem. I had to find somewhere where I can just like crouch in safety for a couple seconds while I reload my gun. So it's interesting, and like the fact that you swap between them keeps things pretty varied. There's pretty good enemy variety, which forces you to switch back and forth, which I like. Each character also has these sub-weapons, which you'll appreciate because they both end up having their own weapon wheel, which you bring up exactly like you would in Saints Row. And this is what the game gets really interesting, I think, is you start out with a couple really basic sub-weapons, like much like you would see in a Castlevania game. Like one of the characters has sort of a knife that she can throw, and the other one has a shield. But then they turn into these really interesting, almost like traversal abilities. Like you unlock a sub-weapon that creates a little origami crane you can use as a platform to reach like out of reach ledges and stuff like that. And you get a grappling hook and an umbrella, which is sort of like the glider from Breath of the Wild, so you can just extend your jumps a little bit. Which I think is really cool. And like by the end of the game, you have this whole arsenal of weird sub-weapons that just sort of make you more capable in exploring this castle and sort of dealing with the enemies you run into.
Cool.
So I mentioned it was kind of a Castlevania game, and when I got into it, or before I had played it, I assumed it was sort of like the Metroidvania sort of RPG elements, exploring this big expansive castle. But it turns out it's much closer to one of the more classic Castlevania games where it's like stage-based. Which I guess makes sense because that's closer to sort of Inti Create's catalog of games. So initially there's not as much backtracking as I thought there was going to be. But it turns out you're kind of encouraged to go back and replay stages just because you acquire all these new like sub-weapons and tools to unlock new like routes to the levels. And I can only assume there are a bunch of secrets I missed, because at the end of each stage it shows you sort of a map of the route you took through a level. And inevitably there is some path where I'm just like, I don't think I went that way. It looks like there's a little hidden room that way. I should go back and check it out. Or, you'll run into a door or a gate or something which you just can't get through. It feels like you need to unlock through a certain like means which you don't currently have. So
that sounds very Castlevania.
Yeah. It's sort of weird because it's like it feels very Metroidvania, but it's very much in the like linear Castlevania mold. So it really incentivizes you to go back and revisit levels, which I think is cool.
Cool.
So I've been having a good time with it. It's been really good, especially after the action sequences in Lunark kind of fizzled. Just playing like a not incredibly intense action game. It comes with 2 difficulty settings initially, and as far as I can tell, I think the sort of like overall balance is very similar. You may get fewer item drops on casual mode compared to the normal mode, but the way it differentiates these when it asks you to pick between one, it says if you play it on casual, you have unlimited lives and there's no knockback when you get hit by an enemy. And I have to say, I'm a little wary about playing an Indie Creates game, even on the normal mode, because they tend to be a little more difficult, especially when you get into the boss fights. And I was thinking, I'm here for the action stuff, and I like Indie Creates boss fights in general, so I'll just play it on normal mode. But I thought, I never really cared for like the whole live system in a Castlevania game to begin with, or like Mega Man games, which might as well be an Indie Creates game. And the worst thing that can happen to you in Castlevania is you're like trying to jump onto a platform and some bat flies out of nowhere and knocks you into a pit. So if you can turn that off, that sounds great too. So I've just been playing this on casual mode. It's been fine. It's just been kind of a nice like palate cleanser after Lunark, and I just wanted something kind of like breezy to go through as we get ready for Zelda to come out. That being said, the bosses are still pretty challenging. They're still very typical Indie Creates bosses. Like, you watch them for a little bit, you learn what their attacks do, and you figure out how to deal with it. And most of the time, it turns out the answer is using one of those cool sub-weapons, so that's been a lot of fun as well. It's not... I mean, there is just a lot of dodging and evading to be done, but most of the time there's a clever way to defeat them using one of the sub-weapons, which has been cool.
That's fun.
Yeah. So I've been having a pretty good time with it. It's not quite as expansive as I was expecting it to be, but that's probably fine. I don't know if I was... Like, if this turned out to be a 40-hour RPG, I don't think I'd be into it. But
right.
I've already gone through one loop, and as I said, it kind of strongly suggests you go through it at least twice. So I'm probably going to do that, and then see what places I can get to now that I have all the sub-weapons.
Cool. Oh, and you can carry all of those back through a second playthrough.
Oh, yeah. It's more or less... It kind of forces you to play it a second time. I think it's like a minor spoiler, but the second time you're much better equipped because you've got all your gear, you've got some upgrades. It should be interesting to kind of revisit all the stages again. So that's Gal Guardians. Interestingly, it's originally called... I think it was called Grim Guardians, but there was some copyright issue with using that name in the US, so it got changed for, I think, the US only. So, Gal Guardians / Grim Guardians, based on your region. But pretty cool. Just kind of a light sort of Castlevania game. Except one of the characters has a machine gun, so that's fun.
And there's a demo for this in the eShop on the Switch, it looks like. So,
there is. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
you want to check it out before dropping the money down on it, that's the way to go.
Yeah. It's pretty good. The characters are very vocal for whatever reason. Like, whenever they're doing one of their attacks, they usually have some voice line that goes with it, so it gets a little repetitive. So I switched it over to Japanese audio, so it's more or less just like background sound effects to me, because I don't really understand what they're saying. So I don't know if people are sensitive to just characters in games talking all the time, but it was getting a little much having them just be spouting out English lines all the time. But now it just sounds like they're, screaming stuff in Japanese, which is fine.
little harder to get stuck in your head, at least.
Yeah. It makes me, like, I always wondered how Japanese players perceive Street Fighter 2, where, like, Ryu and Ken are just yelling stuff in Japanese over and over whenever they do any attack. And to me, it was like, I don't know what they're saying, so it just sounds like they're shouting the name of some cool attack they're doing. But, like, Japanese people actually, they're saying real words to them. Is that weird? Because they're just trying to play this game, but they're, like, talking all the time.
The Japanese players go into the menu and select English.
Oh, so yeah, they just switch to English.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that where, like, Hadouken comes from? Is that not a move?
No, that's it. That's, they're just saying whatever, like, wave fist or whatever that means in Japanese. So just imagine some guy saying that.
Interesting.
Well, I guess, like, most of the rest of the cast says stuff in English, so I don't know why that didn't occur to me. I guess it's not that distracting, but, I was like, he's just saying Hadouken a lot. I don't know what that means.
I mean, it's the only reason I know what the word Hadouken is. So.
Yeah.
Cool. This looks really neat. I mean, I love the idea of bringing a machine gun into a Castlevania game. I can only imagine what implications that might have. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah. It was worth mentioning that there's like a simultaneous co-op mode, so you can play it 2 players. I think couch co-op, where you each control one sister, which I think would be interesting.
Oh.
And I think it opens up a few more possibilities, because otherwise, like, if you're just playing it single player, there's only one of them on screen at a time. But if you're playing a co-op, I think you can, like, jump on each other to reach higher platforms, or there are different weapon combinations. So one of the sub-weapons is like a freeze move, and you can freeze the other sister's weapons. And I don't know why you would want to do that, but it seems like there are a lot of interesting combinations you could come up with, just having both of them available at the same time.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah. So maybe a little deeper, sort of mechanically, if you're playing co-op mode.
Yep.
And that brings me to the other game on my list.
Back. Yep.
Playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV as usual. But notably, I did the thing that I said I was never going to do in this game, which is I joined a raid group, which now meets regularly on the weekends, so we can tackle the ultimate difficulty raids in this game, or one of them anyway. And I talked about those before. Basically, the way the content in this game works is there's like story level content, and then there's a couple levels of difficulty above that, which I think is basically what people spend the bulk of their time sort of working on. Like, those are the big challenges that they're trying to surmount. And those are the ones that sort of get cycled out most regularly whenever a new update comes out. And those are called Savage or Extreme Raids, but every once in a while, like once or twice during an expansion cycle, they'll put out one of these ultimate difficulty level raids. And these are the ones that are like, they're for like the hardest of the hardcore player base, because they're designed to be so difficult that it takes even the sort of most out of their mind raiders. Typically it'll take them about a week to complete, just a week of nonstop throwing themselves at these fights. So I talked about when the most recent one of these came out, people would just be like up around the clock streaming it and trying to be the first team in the world to take out this ultimate raid. And yeah, sure enough, it took teams like I think a little over a week to complete the latest one of these, and that's incredibly seasoned players going at this for the bulk of the day. Like, people generally take time off for this world race when that happens.
And this is not the team that you said got caught cheating. These are people actually doing the thing.
Oh, well, yeah, one of the teams did get caught cheating, but
yeah.
I feel like a lot of them do it mostly legit. I think some of them use little like augments to their, UI or whatever, but not to the extent that one team, like a Busted, did. But, generally, people are doing these without cheat editions. And it still takes them a week, so that just sort of speaks to how difficult these are. But at this point, there are 5 or 6 of these that have come out over the last few years. I had sort of decided that I never really wanted to do one in the same fashion that you see people doing them during the world races. Like, I don't want to take time off work. I don't want to be up for 24 hours just like doing the same fight over and over. But at this point, a few of them have been out for so long, and they're just like so dissected, and people understand how they work, and there are all these strategies around them, that I thought, maybe just, on my journey as a Final Fantasy XIV player, I should do one of these just to see how it is. So I found a group of like-minded individuals, and we got this whole group together, and now we've just been doing this old Ultimate on weekends. It's called the Weapons Refrain. It's a revision. It's like a reimagining of the first final boss from Final Fantasy XIV, and it basically takes some of the it takes that final boss fight and several of the like more notable boss fights leading up to it, and combines them all into this like roughly 13-minute long boss fight, which is like on the long side for boss encounters in this game. But this is also a very different approach to like raiding for me in this, because typically, like I said, I don't join these groups. I don't join these like static groups of the same 8 people every week. Normally when I want to do one of these raids, I will just join the party finder and find 7 random other people who happen to be also looking to do that fight for that evening, which I like because it's very flexible. It I don't have to schedule anything in advance. It's sort of like I can do raids on my own terms.
Mm-hmm.
But there are disadvantages as well, because first of all, you just don't know whether you're going to find 7 people for that evening, and you do spend a lot of time just waiting around. And then you also don't really know sort of the quality of the players you're going to run into. So it's very common to, even if you get everybody together for a group, you'll jump into the fight, and it turns out somebody was just really not ready for this type of fight, or they're struggling to keep up a little bit, and it's holding the rest of the group back.
Mm-hmm.
So there are trade-offs, but I felt like the sort of like pickup group style approach has worked very well for me. And you can still do that, like people do that with these ultimate raids, but since I sort of had this group going already, I thought, well, we'll just see how this goes.
Are these people kind of in the real world, or is this something you sort of assembled on the internet somewhere?
No, there are people who I knew in the game already that I don't know any of them in person.
Gotcha. But like folks you played with in the past.
Yeah. So I had some idea, like I'm pretty sure these guys know what they're doing, so that made me feel a little better. But that being said, I've never been in a situation where it's just the same 7 other people every week.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I've never done this fight before. And I don't know these people super well. So you better believe that before we first convened to start this fight, I was studying for this like it was a final exam in school or something. I had like all these videos bookmarked. I had enormous text guides. So I'd like open in browser tabs. I was looking at all these like diagrams, because this fight is years old and there are multiple ways to approach it at this point. But I was just like, I don't want to get in there and everybody is just breezing through everything. And I am the sole player who's just like, well, I didn't think this would be this complicated. I'll come back tomorrow and see if we're in better shape.
You are the weakest link.
Yes, exactly. That was my greatest nightmare going into this.
Oh. I've made my peace with like first person shooters that I am always that player, and you just get really good at going, guys, I'm down again. Could somebody do a health pack? Somebody get the little paddles and shock me back to life, please. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I'm typically that person as well in a first person shooter. But in this one, I mean, I assume I will just get better at it, or everybody will get better at it with practice. Yeah. But really don't want to be the one who just like can't get over the hump on some of these these phases. So that's what I was worried about. So anyway, I was watching all these guides, all these videos, really just like studying up, having a lot of anxiety going to this first raid meeting.
Studying the game tape.
Yeah, exactly. Man, it's gotten pretty out of hand. Some of the stuff I've been doing to like prepare for this. Like I would go. Wow. Like, people will post logs whenever they complete one of these fights, which is basically, it extracts sort of the, like, everything that happened during the boss encounter, and, like, people will just, like, upload it to this website that, like, tabulates all of that. So I went and looked up what, like, a previous clear somebody had gotten on this fight, and just saw what one of the players did at every moment. Like, they have the whole timeline marked out for all 13 minutes.
That's neat.
Yeah, it's cool. It's kind of unique to the MMO space, I think, where you're able to basically get an analysis of somebody's entire performance on this fight and really like inspect it and just figure out like, oh, how did they deal with this mechanic, and how did they, like, what were they doing 4 minutes in when this boss is doing this specific thing. And it sounds like kind of insane, but I'm loving it. It reminds me of the good old spreadsheet days when I was designing my ship in Star Trek Online. But I've just found myself, not even really playing the game, but just looking over these timelines and just trying to get some insight out of them.
Huh.
So with all that preparation, eventually we did jump into it. And I have to say, this is not trying to be a flex or anything. I feel like it's not that hard. I feel like we've been progressing pretty well. And I don't know I feel like it's a combination of things. Like, we're all pretty decent at the game. The other thing is, it's, like I said, it's an older fight. So one thing that happens is just older fights as they age, and the way the game updates characters and like stats and everything, they just tend to get a little bit easier. Players tend to hit harder, and so you run into fewer cases where you just weren't able to kill a boss in time. So there's a little bit of that. And also, I think a lot of the difficulty around this specific fight there was sort of a puzzle at the core of it that was like designed to catch raiders off guard, where basically they would get into this fight and approach it like a normal fight. But it turned out that the fight requires you to defeat some of these bosses in very specific and sort of esoteric ways. Otherwise, you're just unable to progress past a certain point in the fight. And this was a lot of fun to watch during the original World Race because people didn't realize what was happening. So they struggled for like several days to get halfway through this fight. And then another boss would show up and just kill them. And there was nothing they could do about it. And people were just stumped until they figured out this whole sort of puzzle aspect of it. But I feel like now that has been solved, now that is like widely known, we don't have to worry about that part. Like, somebody did the puzzle part for us. So we're just doing it the correct way from the get-go. So that's also taken a little bit of the sort of challenge out of it.
So when you say puzzle, is it like not like Tetris or something, right? I mean, there's some process, some methodology you have to deploy to do this successfully, or is there literally some, I don't know, pick a thing, a Tomb Raider style puzzle in the middle of this that you have to solve?
Yeah, it's not quite that explicitly a puzzle, although there are some fights that will make you do like Dance Dance Revolution or something in the middle of it, which is kind of weird. What's the best way to describe it? But basically, so in one of the phases in this, several players get targeted for like an explosion, like the boss hits them with an explosion. And what you think you have to do is, just have those players run away from the party so the explosion doesn't hit everybody. But what you actually need them to do is run to these specific points on the arena so the explosions hit these other environmental objects in the arena, which people were just not doing because they didn't realize that was important.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it's kind of like little hidden things like that, which cause a lot of difficulty for people the first time they ran into this.
Which you wouldn't necessarily kind of intuit from the way that the game normally plays, I presume.
Yeah, you kind of have to be looking for clues that there's even something else going on. Like, when people, probably the first time somebody did that just by accident, I think the boss gets a little, like, a new icon on them or something that shows that something unusual has happened. And people were like, wow, what's this icon mean? What happens if he gets enough of those icons? And eventually they put it all together. But it was, like, just something that during the normal course of fighting this boss, you probably wouldn't really notice.
Cool. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, I like it. It's really clever sort of fight design.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so now that we're into it, it kind of just feels like we're beating our heads against just any other fight in this game. It's definitely different, like difficulty-wise, than other fights, but there's so many ways a fight can be difficult. It's hard to say whether it's like significantly more difficult than one of the like purportedly lower difficulty fights in this. It just, like, the thing that really sticks out about it to me is that it's very fast compared to any other fight. Because typically what will happen is the boss will do an attack and you'll have to figure out, like, okay, where do we have to stand for this one? Or do people have to huddle together? Or like, does somebody have to run an explosion all the way to the other side of the room so it doesn't hit anybody? And when that happens in other encounters in this, it'll all play out, and then you'll have a few moments to sort of like catch your breath and regroup and think about what's coming up next. Mm-hmm. But in this one, it's like, oh no, the next thing is already happening. So you really have to just be like mentally present the entire time and just like thinking about the next moment, everything that you're going to have to deal with.
And it's only 13 minutes, so just hang in there.
It's only 13 minutes, yeah. It feels like a blessing almost. Like the fight starts with you fight like a boss rush of 3 bosses, and each of these 3 bosses, they're only there for like 2 minutes. Like you have 2 minutes to kill them, and it sounds brief. And I guess it ultimately is brief, but I'm like, oh my god, it's a good thing that didn't go on for like 5 minutes, because I don't know how much I could deal with.
Say, how many times did you die in those 2 minutes? Yeah.
Yeah. It took us quite a while. Like the first boss, probably we were fighting for, I don't know, like 45 minutes.
Oh my god.
Before we were able to make it all the like 2 minutes in consistently. So it's been different. It's been a different experience, and I'm hoping we can get through it, get all the way to the end, because it's been very interesting. And I would just sort of have to I would like to have one of these ultimates sort of on my belt at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes. Another interesting thing I noticed is that after we finished our first session, which is we're doing like a couple hours, it was like, well, okay, well now what? So we were just like in the super intense fight for just 2 hours straight, and I was like, certainly there are other things I could be doing in the game at this point, but I was just kind of like, I just want to go back and practice the fight some more, because it's like this fresh new thing. And I hear about people who, they go from savage rating to doing these ultimates, and they're just like, well, anything that's not as difficult as an ultimate just doesn't do it for me anymore. I'm just like bored of this game, and I'm going to unsubscribe. And I don't see myself getting to that point, but I definitely had that feeling where I was like, wow, what do I even do with myself now that, our ultimate meeting is over?
Cool. Well, you'll have to keep us posted on your progress.
Yeah, I'm hoping we can get through it in the next month or so, because that's when the next big content update comes out. But that's been really interesting. I never really expected to be doing like an ultimate fight. I never really thought I'd find myself in one of these groups, but that's had its benefits as well, so it's been kind of cool.
And there are other ultimates, so if you conquer this one, you could go challenge yourself against others if you wanted to.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I don't know if I want to do another one after this. Just because this one has the reputation of being the easiest one for various reasons. And just listening to people's stories of, especially the most recent couple of them, they're like, oh yeah, the night we finally cleared, I was like crying from relief of not having to do this fight anymore. I was like, well, that doesn't sound like somewhere I want to be mentally with this game. Ugh. I definitely appreciate sort of, it's fun to get together with a group and just throw yourself at this boss until you triumph over it. But
yeah,
I don't know if I want to do that, to just suffer through it for months on end, because that's how long it takes sometimes for people to finish one of these fights. I like to keep it still somewhat casual.
I think we need to see other people. Yeah. Cool.
But it's cool. Yeah, I never thought I would be here sort of in my Final Fantasy career, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you've done all the other stuff, why not? Right? I mean,
there was a little bit of that too. I was just like, well, what's left? What haven't we done? Maybe this thing.
What worlds have I not conquered?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, you want to wrap this thing up?
I think that's it. That's a lot of games.
Yeah. Well, if you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. And you can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com. You should join us on Discord. You can hang out with us, chat about video games. You can private message me on Discord and let me know what you think about my completely absurd Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom theory.
All right.
And we would encourage you to subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcasting app of choice. We're on all of them. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're even on YouTube.
Yeah.
check us out anywhere you can get a podcast, and maybe help us out by telling your friends about the show.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. It helps us get the word out, bring in new listeners. So that would be great.
Yeah.
We want to give thanks again to Carl Brueggemann for our intro and outro music this week. You can hear more of his stuff at carlbmusic.bandcamp.com. That's Carl B with a K. But maybe head on over there, add an album or two to your cart, and send him a few bucks.
Nice. We'll be back next week. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya.
This is where I'm going to drop in Randy's completely uncensored Zelda theory. So if you don't want to hear that, better turn it off.
Listeners, if you're sensitive to wild, harebrained theories about Tears of the Kingdom, you might want to skip ahead. I have a theory based on the last trailer that Link is Ganondorf.
Oh, okay. That's a good theory.
And that we're doing some wild time travel, time shifting, paradimensionality kind of thing. And that the hero of Hyrule is also the villain of Hyrule. And it's not all over the internet. And I watched the trailer a couple times, and I'm left to the same conclusion every time I see it, where I'm like, no, that's kind of what it looks like is happening right there.
Oh, this is your own theory that you came up with?
I think so, because I've searched Google for it, and I've watched, YouTube, the 15 things you missed from the last Zelda trailer. And nobody else is calling this out. So maybe I'm insane, or maybe I'm right and everybody else is wrong.
Okay.
That's generally not how these things go, but we'll all find out together on May 12th.
That would be quite a thing if that would happen.
It would be. You heard it here first on Video Game Hangover.